Hello, my name is Captain Aegis Melancholic Risota, and today I wanted to take time to talk about the current state of stasis as an element. To put it simply, it's bad. As we all know, stasis came with Beyond Light, and it came out swinging. Behemoths were the fastest subclass in the game, Shadebinders could freeze people back to back to back, and Revenant had Shatter Dive. Not much more really needs to be said. However, it soon got promptly and heavily nerfed. They got adjusted accordingly in the future, with some getting more equal treatment than others, but even these subclasses aren't as useful as their competition. So today, I wanted to share my thoughts on how I would fix stasis. Also, as I'm sure you know, I cannot test any of this. So if anything sounds broken to you, let me know how you would fix that problem in the comments below. I love stasis, and I want to gather others that love stasis to work on a potential rework. All I ask is that you keep the comments civil. Firstly, I want to tackle the base kits, namely two outliers in particular, stasis shards and stasis crystals. Firstly, I want to bring stasis shards into the base stasis kit. Now, slowing, freezing, and or shattering, or just using stasis abilities, will now generate a stasis shard. Making 10 stasis shards at a time will result in an 8 to 10 second cooldown. However, if you make 5 now and make 5 later, there will be no cooldown. With this in mind, I will be repurposing the stasis shard aspects on each subclass to aspects that enhance your stasis weapons. Stasis is supposed to represent control over yourself and others, so why not show that by enhancing stasis weapons like Gunslinger does? Second is the matter of stasis crystals. I want to get rid of them. Entirely. Instead, I want to replace them with frigid seekers, with one exception. More on that later. And yes, frigid seekers, like the projectiles made by Winterbite, except they shatter targets frozen and they move slightly faster, but they expire sooner. They also have an alternate mode called Stationary Seekers, which function the same way, except they are, as the name entails, stationary. Now that we've got that cleared away, we get to go into the subclass specifics. Real quick, I want to talk about this spreadsheet I made. I made this so we can mimic how the subclass screen is shown in-game to make things easier to visualize. White is for stuff that's not being touched, red is the new implements I made, pink is for stuff that's being adjusted, and the crossed out options are what I'm removing entirely. For Shadebinder and Revenant, we'll be adding another super, another melee ability, and a reworked aspect to keep up with other subclasses, but Behemoth will get special treatment, so I'd like to start with them first. For supers, we are ditching a Glacial Quake entirely. This super has 3 bosses it's shown for: Cabal Tanks, Fallen Walkers, and Riven's Hand. Any other boss could work, but I feel they rely too heavily on stepping on the stasis crystals you created. Instead, we are going to replace it with 2 new supers, starting with Ishard's Lance. For this super, you conjure a massive lance of stasis energy and launch it into a surface, killing and shattering any enemies it passes through. This will make a freezing shockwave upon contact. Afterward, it makes 2 more shockwaves back to back, one to shatter frozen targets, and one more to refreeze. It makes these 2 shockwaves after intervals of a couple seconds. The second new Behemoth super is called Frozen Key. For this super, imagine the Rasputin javelins from Warmind, but stasis and with heavy damage resist. These javelins have a light attack and a heavy attack, with light attacks having you throw the lance to freeze enemies on contact, and heavy attacks having you slam down, shattering frozen targets. Behemoth gets to keep Shiver Strike, solely for the movement tech, but they get a new range melee called Throwing Lance. These lances work like the charge shot on Cryosthesia, freezing on direct impact and slowing on indirect impact. I wanted Behemoth to be a proper range subclass for Titans, since we don't have one of those yet, and I feel like this is a step in the right direction. Bringing Stasis shards into the base Stasis kit means we'll have to replace the aspects associated with Stasis shards. As I explained before, I've opted to replace these old aspects with new ones that enhance Stasis weapons upon collecting Stasis shards. The new Tectonic Harvest now gives Stasis weapons increased range, projectile velocity, or swing speed, whichever applies, and aim assist for 5 seconds upon picking up a Stasis shard. However, Tectonic Harvest isn't the only aspect that needs tweaking, as we also needed to change Howl of the Storm since we're getting rid of Stasis crystals. This new rework will work like Lightning Surge on the Stormcaller, except essentially turning you into a massive Frigid Seeker, freezing enemies around you upon using your melee while sliding, and shattering frozen targets around you when you emerge. Now, if you thought the Behemoth changes were super meaty, don't worry. Shadebinder and Revenant aren't nearly as bad, however, Revenant mainly just has a lot of words, so I'll talk about them next. Revenants get a new super called Coming Avalanche. For this super, you conjure 2 Stasis commas, one in each hand, and have a light attack and a heavy attack. The light attack swipes at an enemy to deal damage and shatter frozen targets, and the heavy attack throws one of your commas, freezing targets in the area on impact. Revenants also get another melee with 2 charges called Triple Strike. One hit with this melee will grant 50 plus 15 slow stacks, which means 2 hits will freeze set targets. At this point, you can use your base melee to shatter them, so if you're wondering why a melee called Triple Strike would have 2 charges, now you know. Now Revenants also have 2 aspects that needed tweaking, those being Grim Harvest and Touch of Winter. Grim Harvest will now grant Stasis weapons bonus handling and reload speed for 5 seconds upon picking up a Stasis shard, and Touch of Winter now makes a stationary seeker that automatically shatters targets frozen in the dusk field. Next up is the subclass with the least amount of changes, that being Shadebinder. Shadebinders get a new super called Glacial Melt, in which you use your Stasis staff to conjure a massive glacier and throw it in a chosen direction. Enemies nearby the glacier as it passes get frozen, and enemies on impact shatter if they don't die on initial impact. So this mainly applies to bosses. Shadebinders also get a new melee called Power of 3, in which you use your Stasis staff to send out 3 Stasis fields that slow, granting you 10 plus 5 slow stacks when walked on. Pressing the melee button will send them out in a fan of 3, or holding the melee button will send them out one on top of the other. And in case you were wondering, yes, these Stasis fields are the same as the ones you get shot at with in the Corrupted Strike. Finally, the only aspect that needs tweaking is the Glacial Harvest aspect. With this aspect equipped, picking up a Stasis shard grants Stasis weapons 5 seconds of bonus stability and recoil direction. Now, after the subclass specific changes, we're still not done. Now we needed to talk about the base ability changes, exotic armor, exotic weapons, then legendary weapon perks in that order. With that in mind, I'd like to replace the Glacier Grenade with the Drone Grenade, which makes a Frigid Seeker after leaving the Guardian's hand. Whisper of Shards now temporarily boosts grenade recharge rate after shattering frozen targets, and Whispers of Chain and Rending have the Stasis Crystal part of how they work removed, instead now just functioning off of shattering frozen targets. Next is Exotic Armor, where only 3 need to be reworked, 2 for Behemoth and 1 for Revenant. Starting off with the Behemoth and the Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap. This will work with the Diamond Lance from the aspect, creating a Frigid Seeker on impact, and the Throwing Lance melee, creating a Stasis Seeker, like the one from the Cold Snap Grenade on impact. Then it's the Hoarfrost Z, which has been reworked to function as the Stasis equivalent to Kepri's Horn or Drenger's Lash on Berserker, creating a Frigid Seeker when casting a Towering Barricade, and a Stasis Seeker when casting a Rally Barricade. And finally is the Revenant's Renewal Grasp, which will make a stationary Seeker in the middle of the dusk field that shatters targets frozen inside, in addition to the increased damage resist. This will work as a proper stationary Seeker instead if paired with the Touch of Winter aspect, freezing targets in addition to slowing them. Next up is Stasis Exotic Weapons, starting with Winterbite. Since the projectile made by this weapon is now a base ability, I feel comfortable, if not slightly cautious, bringing it up to the kinetic slot. As for that Stasis Crystal exception from the beginning, that exception lies in Salvation's grip. How Salvation Fallen will not change how they use Stasis, and since Salvation's grip is a fallen weapon, I have opted to keep it the way it is. While we don't have Stasis Crystals anymore, we also don't have any burst fire shotguns, yet we are still able to use the Lord of Wolves. As for Stasis legendary weapon perks, only one needs to be reworked. The perk Headstone will now make a stationary Seeker for up to 3 seconds upon precision. The truly last thing that I want to change is the lore tab for Behemoth to keep up with the in-game changes. If you don't care about lore, feel free to click off, check me out on Twitch, and take care of yourself and others. As for the rest of you, I have a decent story for this lore tab. It's largely the same, but these slight changes I believe make a world of difference. I was the first, though I would soon forget. The ground ruptured and sizzled as scorch cannons and wire rifles pummeled my cover from all directions. Fallen war cries echo through their endless ranks. Despair grew within me, but with it came a whisper, an offer. I closed my eyes and accepted. The cold embraced me, dimming the sounds of battle into reverberant echoes, thin and distant. I grasped at the power in front of me, and felt the roar of ice spikes grinding against the bones of the world. I plunged my spear into the earth, and time around me froze. I gazed into the frost enveloping my enemies, and in the gaps in the blue emptiness, I saw their fear. I felt their desperate will to escape my grasp, and in the moment before release, I shattered it. As I collapsed, the battlefield that was once loud with the sound of gunfire has gone silent, and I am left with my thoughts. I was the first to wield this dark power, though I would soon forget, as these would be my final moments, and as I lay in the snow, body covered in scorch and arc residue, I trust future Risen to leave this power be. When it comes to subclass lore tabs, rarely do we hear about the Guardian on the other side, and how this new power affects them, so I thought this would be a neat idea, alongside adding a potentially interesting story. However, that will be at the end of today's video. As I said at the beginning, if you have any ideas about balance changes, all I ask is y'all keep it civil in the comments. Yelling at someone because they made something potentially unbalanced is not constructive. That being said, I'm going to cut it off here. In the meantime, go ahead and like and subscribe. Takes little effort, but means the world to me. While you're at it, go ahead and check me out on Twitch and help me reach affiliate over there, so we can upgrade my content. However, even if you do none of these things, then all I ask is that you take care of yourself and others, but don't forget to take care of yourself at the same time. And as always, have a great morning, day, evening, wherever you are. Peace.